Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. I'm really excited about today's guest, Katie Harris, and she's got a very interesting story from the nursing standpoint, and she is going to talk about nurse burnout. She's going to be talking about becoming an entrepreneur, turning lemons into lemonade, and I'm really excited to have Katie on the show. So, Katie, welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So, you remind me of a lot of my colleagues and physicians. And talk about, your story from a nursing standpoint, how you got started, how you founded Nursepreneurs. And it's going to be a fantastic discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So I worked nursing for years. I was bedside. Always worked in the neurosurgery units. And I went and got my nurse practitioner and worked with neurosurgery for years after that. So in total, it was like 15, 20 years that I worked with neurosurgery. And to be honest, I absolutely loved it. I mean, you couldn't get me out of the hospital. Like I spent all my time there. I just wanted to be there. We were like a family. The nurses and the residents and the docs, so, we would all go hang out together. Some of them were my best friends. I didn't take vacation for years because I enjoyed it so much. But then it started to kind of like wear on me after a while in just that, it was very repetitive. Like I had to do the same thing over and over and over again. And I saw, I grew up with my residents, and I saw my residents grow up and take on other positions and move to new hospitals. And, I wasn't able to do that. And I felt really, really kind of just stuck. Like there was this ceiling for me. And I'm the type of person that constantly has to grow and learn new things. And, neurosurgery in and of itself it was a long learning curve anyway. It was a steep learning curve. But when you get, when you come out of the fog of it, it's just kind of like, okay, what's next? What's next? And there was no what's next. And that's really, in essence, where Nursepreneurs came from, because I needed a what's next. I needed to have some purpose for doing what I was doing. And it wasn't enough just to keep doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's not confined to just the health. It sounds like it's not just doctors. It sounds like, my wife's a pharmacist. She tells me the same thing that you're telling me. Nursing, I haven't heard much from optometry, but I'm sure that's coming. So kind of talk about what is nurse burnout, to set the stage.
Yeah. And, to be clear, like to your point, it's not just nurses. Like, I see it in our hospitalist, I see it in the pharmacist, I see it in, a lot of the PT and whatever. And I think a lot of it is, we've been so streamlined all of us to do the same thing over and over again. And, we still routinely see the same fires over and over again. It's like, when I come into the hospital, I know what 15 things are going to go wrong that day because it's not organized. It's disorganized, or there's not enough staff, or there's not enough this, and you bring the problems up to management. And, nothing ever changes. Like in 20 years, we were still dealing with the same stuff, and the problems were exciting for the first couple of years. And then it's just kind of like, this is just stupid. Like, why can't we change this? Why can't this process be improved or better? So, you really feel like you're doing something that's not making the impact that you want it to have. And, the other image that I've always had in my mind was a conveyor belt. Like people would come in, and these are neurosurgical patients, the cerebral aneurysm rupture or something like that. It's devastating. And it's kind of like, all right, well, as soon as they come in, how do we get rid of them? And, we have to push them along this conveyor belt so that we can bring in more people. And it was just, a lot of it lacked purpose and meaning. And I think that's what burnout really comes down to, is not feeling like you're contributing in any way to like the improvement or the betterment of some bigger picture.
Yeah, you talked about purpose and meaning, and the other question is, so here's something that's really interesting, and I saw it on I read this article where more and more hospitals are using traveling nurses, and so basically kind of ostracizing or marginalizing like full-time nurses. And there's also this question of safety, especially nurses are direct line to patients, doctors as well. And it's just, you hear more and more instances of hospital violence. So kind of talk about this growing the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the agency and the travel nursing is really kind of like a microcosm, if you will, of like a bigger problem of what's going on in the hospital, because it's like, and this is how it feels, that management, they see a nurse is a nurse is a nurse is a nurse, right? So, if somebody's breathing and they have a pulse, they can be a nurse, and that nurse can be replaced. And that's how it feels when you're nursing, that you just can be replaced if you complain or you do this or you do that or the other thing. And it's very evident when they bring in staffing, like they budget a lot of money to bring in these agency nurses, not recognizing that the culture of the unit is what keeps it together, right? So I worked for 20 years on the same unit. That was my family, right? Like if it were a bunch of random disparate agency nurses that came and went, I wouldn't have had the same bond. I wouldn't have had the same need to go there all the time and make things better. And by taking that away, they do a huge disservice to the culture of that unit, and the ability for the nurses to kind of work as a unit. So, and then the thing is too, is they'll bring in these nurses in that are agency nurses. They pay them like twice as much, and they get to choose the days that they want to work. And and then the older nurses who are making less are kind of relegated to night shift, weekends, holidays, that kind of stuff. So then it's kind of like, well, why am I here? Like, why don't I just quit my job, get a job as an agency, and come back to the same unit, work in the days and times that I want to? And it just breaks the whole system.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. The other question is this, and then there was like Bernie Sanders and I think it was Robert Wood Johnson. He criticized the hospital because they were bringing in these agency nurses, and I'm not sure if nurses can unionize. I know doctors they can't, but I know more and more. And then criticized the CEO for making 17 million, and just kind of being a leech on the system. So kind of talk about this idea of this growing concern of workplace violence in the healthcare profession.
Yeah, and I mean, I would certainly say that, I'm not offended by anybody making lots of money. I think that's great. It's the American way, go for it. But one of the things that's very true is that, how much the CEO has like absolutely zero impact on how patient outcomes are, whereas there are like thousands of studies that show a direct correlation to nursing care and patient outcomes, right? And yet the first thing that they want to do when times are tough is give a bonus to the CEO and cut the nurses. So it's just kind of a weird paradigm there. And yeah, I mean, it's a stressful place to be. The hospital is very, very stressful. Like you have people coming in that maybe they don't have health insurance. And in our case, in our unit in particular, in our ICU, like our patients, a lot of times these are the breadwinners, right? They're the breadwinners of the family. They're like 50 years old. It's a devastating cerebral hemorrhage. And maybe that family has insurance, maybe they have crappy insurance, maybe they don't have any insurance, and the family dynamics they fall apart. Now the nurse has to deal with the patient, has to deal with the crazy family, and the crazy surgeons, and it's just a lot of pressure. And if you don't have that team, you don't have that culture around you to support you, it's just, it's just almost insurmountable. It's hard to do anything in terms of like workplace violence. I mean, we had a shooting at my hospital. One of the techs came back and shot and killed one of the nurses during a shift, which was devastating. But I certainly don't have the answer on how to solve those types of problems. But I mean, it's scary that we see it more and more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what are some options for nurses outside of the hospital? We know we're talking about reconnecting with its original purpose, but how can nurses continue to find work, purpose, and passion without leaving the profession?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we really focus on is how to keep them in the profession, because you have these nurses with like 20, 30 years of experience, especially in one area like oncology or trauma or, neurosurgery or whatever the case may be. And they know so much about, what happens to these patients, and they can really help them in terms of like post-op or in the outpatient setting, like doing coaching, right? So we have some nurse coaches that help brain injured patients, I don't know, through dating again, or, something along those lines. We have nurses that run groups that help women with breast cancer who go into remission. Those women are really lost, because when you're going through any kind of oncology care, you got a team around you, you've got tons of support, and as soon as you go into remission, it's like it's all taken away from you and you're all alone. So there's nurses that are coaching breast cancer survivors in remission and helping them to empower themselves to keep moving forward and looking ahead. And then we certainly have nurses that are in the health and wellness space, functional medicine, integrative care, those types of a variety of different types of clinics. IV hydration has been very popular as well. So,
Yeah. The other question I have is, within that, talk about entrepreneurial ventures. So what are some of the opportunities for nurses, as entrepreneurs? Why nurses make good entrepreneurs, great salespeople, marketing, etc.
I mean, I really see the role as the nurse, and I don't think I saw this when I started Nursepreneurs, but I see it a lot more now. I see nurses as the role of nursing is basically like being a project manager, right? Because you get all the incoming resources, and, radiology is calling you, case management, the physicians, the nurse manager, the patient's family, like everybody has to come through you, and you manage who gets access to the patient at what point and what happens to that patient. So you're excellent at project management because you're dealing with 20 things being thrown at you at once. And then the other thing that you do all day is marketing, right? We market to the patients in terms of educating. So we're constantly educating them on their disease process, their health conditions, what they need to do to get better. And then there's that whole aspect of sales in terms of, if you can get a patient with dementia to take pills that they don't want to take, I mean, to me, that's like great salesmanship. And we're constantly selling that idea of, you need the surgery, you need to get into the MRI machine, you need to, do this, that, and the other thing. So it's an element of persuasion that we do extremely well, because that's our job.
Yeah. So, kind of reconnecting back, you talk about, the system and it's kind of lack of meaning. So reconnecting nursing with its original purpose. And you talk about helping nurses dig beneath the surface of their careers to find passion, purpose, and profit. So what are you doing in that realm to help propel this idea?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our time is spent helping the nurses to say out loud what it is that they want. And, this isn't just a nursing problem. It's, a lot of people can't say what they want. But, kind of digging deep and understanding what it is that they truly love doing, because a lot of us too will jump from position to position. Most nurses that I've talked to, they've worked OR, ICU, outpatient, the radiology clinic, OB, like this. They go really wide with their work experience, and they don't go deep on much. And a lot of it is them looking for, what it is that they really truly love. But it's hard to find that on a surface level. So we really kind of push the nurses to look deep into one area in particular, and look at their skill sets and what they're actually really good at, because they don't recognize a lot of it does have a business model wrapped around it, such as nurses that are great at matchmaking, right? Like connecting people is a huge business service, very valued, and put in the right context. I mean, you can do very well with that. Or consulting is another area that the nurses are really good at once they understand and respect their own expertise.
Yeah. How can people contact you, follow you, reach out to you, check out your work, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, we're at nursepreneurs.com, and all our social media handles are at nursepreneurs, so you can find us there.
Yeah. And let's thank Katie for coming on. Really interesting discussion, and all of her resources will be in links and show notes. And thanks so much for coming on to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.